about the status of higher education and that there's concerns about science education around the world, in the United States in particular, but other places as well. Our students tend to be afraid of science. They think it's too hard. They're not interested in the agricultural sciences anymore. And so we have a real concern about that. And at the same time, a lot of the kinds of jobs and the technologies that are necessary require more education. And so we need our students to be interested in science. And this is driven by a lot of the changes in information and technology that are out there. What we've been working on and thinking about, and when we think about how education needs to change, it's worth looking at the history a little bit. And the current system of higher education, we talked about the land grant, I mentioned it yesterday, and you have a land grant system. It was designed for a world that doesn't exist anymore. It was created when the world was moving into the industrial era, in the United States especially. We're moving into the industrial age. And so next slide. We created a factory model in our minds about how to educate students so that we would put them through their grades and they would all learn the same things and it would all be highly standardized and they would all come out the other side able to do the same kinds of things just like you would do in a factory. And so our students, the thinking was that they should be standardized, and this is, go ahead, not really relevant anymore because we're not in the industrial age anymore. We live in a very highly complex, rapidly accelerating world. The increase in information and knowledge that we talked about yesterday is tremendous. I love this, sample fact that a week's worth of the New York Times contains more information than a person was likely to come across in their entire lifetime in the 18th century. And that 4 exabytes of unique information will be generated this year, which is more than in the previous 5,000 years. So this puts the amount of information and knowledge out there in a context that I think is different than when we just think about going on a computer and how much knowledge is out there. This is what we're trying to convey to our students. And I keep talking about it's like trying to drink from a fire hose for these students. There is so much information. We need to really think, how does this, go ahead, next slide, how does this change to something different? So this means we need to revisit the role that we have as teachers and as professors in the classroom and in higher education. And it also means that we need to explore different ways of educating our students that use modern technology and engage the millennial generation that grew up with the internet. Whether they have full access to it or whether they have a phone, they know that it's there. And that's very different than when I was born or when any of the rest of us were born. Go ahead. So first of all, the role of the professor in education is changing. Whether we want it to or not, it's just a fact. It used to be that we were the experts, that we were the only ones that knew what we knew, and we had to transmit that information out to people and to students. That's not true anymore. So this cartoon just has a little boy raising his hand in class and saying, "Excuse me, Mrs. Warren, Google begs to differ," which I just think is, I've had that happen in my classrooms as well, where I say something and the student has already looked it up online and said, "No, you're wrong." And we have to deal with that as a fact. Go ahead. So the idea then, and I've done different searches. I did some searches on pictures of professors in India, and I did some searches on pictures of professors all around the world, and they all tend to look with different colors something like this. And in the past, we were, with the tie and the glasses and looking very, very smart and sometimes very stern, and we were the gatekeeper of knowledge or the experts. But now, with Google, of course, I Googled the word Google because I was curious, and it gets almost 4 billion hits in 0.09 seconds. So that's just a lot of information. Go ahead. Then I said, okay, well, what would happen if I Googled my own soil carbon field where I do research? And I got 2.4 million results in half a second. And now I don't know that much about soil carbon, and most of these sites I had no idea that they existed. So for me, this was news, and my students obviously in this classroom have access to this on their phones. So who's the expert now? Who's the gatekeeper of knowledge? I have to rethink my role when I'm in my classroom with my students because I don't know all of these things. So I can't compete with Google. Most of us can't compete with Google, although maybe there are some very special individuals out there that come close, but that's a different story. So what do we do? We have to rethink the role. I just love the title of this book, Teaching with Your Mouth Shut. And I think it's appropriate when we think about using technology because we're not necessarily talking when we're using technology. And also, this is not an online course in technology, but this is education technology. This is an example of a modern classroom, called a scale-up classroom, where the students are sitting around tables, each with a laptop, and any one of those student laptops can be projected on the screen around the room. And this is a very different way of thinking about an educational environment compared to a typical classroom with auditorium-style seating. And so the challenge, of course, is not that. Where's Waldo? I don't know if anybody ever played that game with the little friend before. You know, they get the little people with the teacher for the program. Hey, it's this person who's standing up in this number. But that's what an example of how different this is that we don't necessarily automatically know who is the teacher when we walk into a classroom. So we have to maintain what our job is in the classroom. I am still a subject matter expert, but I'm not the only provider of knowledge to my students on that. I am, however, because I have a PhD, I am an expert because that's what it means to get a PhD. So I can help the students and I'm still necessary, but not because of the fact that I know, I'm not going to get to the way that I can help the students. Another way of thinking about it is similar to what we do with extension as well as thinking about moving from our pushing information out to the students and transmitting our knowledge to letting them pull the information, letting them construct their own knowledge based on trying to solve problems or build a boundary. And so this is a graphic that I love from something like students pulling that knowledge, thinking entrepreneurially. Or the final way that I've been thinking about it is thinking about flipping the pyramid. People talk about active learning or learning about doing. In the past, we thought that we would give all of the collective material first in the first couple of years, and then we would gradually be able to use it in a complete place or capstone or thesis or a project of some kind. When in fact, with no way to give a conduct introduction material, a lot of what we do is so much out of it. Then in fact, if we think about it instead, but doing those applications first, helping them understand, helping them use this material, helping them this problem involves not just simple grammar rules, but students not even think. It's complex and it involves conflicts of things like philosophy, social economics, environmental, so designing a curriculum around those five systems, asking the students to have a broad understanding of the problem, and at the same time, we're working to themes, and we're being asked to talk about what these others found. And being responsible on the ethical curriculum out of this student tool. And so it's not, the goal is not quite rather simple, it's very complex, words I have to go out and get, they have to look for a solution to this problem. Then, rather than that, other problems and point of recording a practical deliverable solution to the problem. So I don't care if we don't come to those people. What I want is for them to be professional and to think or some kind of product that would be really good for them. And hopefully what we are doing is enabling students, and we are very creative, we're very interested in terms of a lot of diversity of thinking about what we're going to do. And we're currently developing this as a long-term product, and I was not thinking about it for medical professionals. So, in summary then, just the goal, trying to produce the next generation of leaders and professionals that know, and so they need to be really aware of that. Wherever you are, this is the kind of challenges that we're facing. People working on growing, big, but awareness, how do you do something that would be valuable? So we need to think about this stuff locally. And the challenge that we face when we're working with an education and culture, we really know that thinking about knowledge of students and transmission of that knowledge, and we need to try to challenge that and think about how do we do what we have now, students that we have today, and the role that we think about, how do we become more flexible and adaptive ourselves in education and class. And so with that, I think ultimately it's going to take partnerships of all ideas of all kinds of things to each class. And I haven't been about it, and that's what thank you very much.
Thank you, Teri. Well, I certainly learned a lot there. It was very inspiring. I can see a lot of the concepts Teri brought forward being relevant not only to a university, but to our own organisations, where we're all information and knowledge providers, and we want other people to take that up and say, how can we apply that? I'm thinking of how I can apply it to my children as well. I can give them a problem. How does your room get tidy?
You get a gold star or a silver, a gold medal, a silver medal, or a bronze medal, depending on how tidy it is.
Okay, all right, thank you, Teri. So we'll go to our second speaker, who we also met yesterday, Surendra Goswami, who's the director